Have you ever aced a practice question but then struggled when the problem looked a little different on the real test? Why do some people seem to solve new problems easily while others get stuck even after lots of practice? What's more important, knowing lots of examples or truly understanding the big idea behind them? When you're studying the Bible, there are at least two ways you should examine the text. There are more, but in this series, I will only be focusing on the concepts. I do this because understanding concepts is more important than the individual examples. To me, the individual examples only work if you understand the concept behind it. Very much like mathematics, if you learn the concept behind a mathematical problem, translating that concept across many different problems becomes easier. If you only learned how to work standalone problems, when you encountered similar but different problems, you have a harder time figuring out the answer. Over the years, I've run into this very often. If you never grasp the concept from the beginning, seeing how problems are interconnected is difficult. Not really understanding how individual examples apply to a specific concept leaves you open to deception. Because you miss the overall concept, people can confuse you by applying misrepresented facts in a way that seem logical, but in reality have no connection to the overall concept. The Bible is a great example of this. Take Genesis 1. That's a conceptual chapter. It is an overview of how our world was created. However, moving into chapter 2, it becomes an individual example. Chapter 1 says, God made man in his own image. That is mankind in general. He didn't say he created only Adam and Eve. Adam means mankind. The Adam and Eve story is an individual account relating to the concept. This is very close to the idea of algebra. Algebra is basically addition, subtraction, multiplication, division. The objective is to find the missing factor. Without understanding that the answer to the problem has already been given to you, and you're really only looking for the exact path that got to that answer, makes it difficult to find the hidden number X or Y. It's a puzzle. No more than that. Algebra is an important concept to learn. If you know where you want to be, the answer, then you only have to figure out what information you already have and then figure out what you need to get to that answer. The most important factor is to ask, is that a reasonable number? This is where the problem lies. If you can't spot that it is or isn't a reasonable number, you can be easily deceived into thinking that you have the correct conclusion. This is where people have their beliefs undermined. Adam is both a concept and an individual. It's the X in an algebra problem. Adam stands for all humankind. So asking where did Cain's wife come from misses the whole point. It's not relevant to the story. The story, the individual account, is about Cain's bad choices. If the concept is to understand that not doing your best and blaming your failure on another, not taking responsibility for your own actions, the fact that we don't have Cain's wife's genealogy has no bearing on the individual story. The concept is supported by the individual account. When you're studying the individual accounts of the Bible, remember the concept is what you're looking for. That's how you translate it into your own life. Learning through concepts is generally more effective than learning through individual ideas because it encourages deeper understanding, broader connections, and more lasting retention. Concepts are abstract, overarching ideas that organize knowledge, while individual ideas are specific, concrete pieces of information. Concepts provide an outline for understanding information, allowing you to make connections between different ideas and seeing the bigger picture. It helps you see how different pieces of information relate to each other and to the broader world. This deeper understanding leads to more meaningful and long lasting learning. It also allows for more flexible thinking and the ability to apply knowledge to new situations. Let's talk about the concepts in Genesis 4. We had the first sin with Adam and Eve. Chapter 4 explores how sin does not remain isolated but deepens, spreading from disobedience to violence, envy, and alienation. We will find that sin corrupts relationships, especially between siblings and within society, that human choices have escalating consequences, how God's justice is tempered by mercy. God punishes Cain, but also protects him. Genesis 4 conveys the concept that sin, once introduced, escalates and disrupts human relationships, leading to violence, fear, and the need for divine justice and mercy. Now let's look at the individual example. Cain, out of jealousy that God accepted Abel's offering, but not his, becomes angry. God warns Cain about sin. Sin is crouching at your door. It desires to have you, but you must rule over it. Cain ignores the warning and kills his brother Abel in the field. God confronts Cain, pronounces judgment that he will be a restless wanderer, but also marks him for protection against vengeance. Genesis 4 offers one of the most profound and enduring stories about the destructive power of jealousy. By examining the actions and consequences in the story of Cain and Abel, we can draw important lessons about how jealousy can affect a person's life. Jealousy distorts perception and judgment. Jealousy can cloud your judgment and make you focus on perceived slights rather than actions or areas for growth. Instead of reflecting on why this offering was not accepted, Cain fixates on Abel's success. Jealousy can lead to harmful choices. Jealousy, if left unchecked, can escalate into harmful behavior toward others, including those close to us. Jealousy damages relationships. The first murder in the Bible is a result of jealousy between siblings. Jealousy can destroy even the most fundamental relationships between family, friends, or colleagues. Jealousy has lasting consequences. As a result of his actions, Cain is cursed to be a restless wanderer of the earth, alienated from his family and from his land. Acting out of jealousy can lead to isolation, guilt, and lasting negative consequences that can affect many areas of your life. Jealousy blocks self-improvement. God's warning implies Cain could have changed course. If you do what is right, will you not be accepted? Jealousy often prevents us from looking inward and improving ourselves. Instead of learning or growing, we may become fixated on what others have or achieve. Jealousy can be controlled. God's advice is you must rule over it. Jealousy is a natural emotion, but we're responsible for managing it. Self-control and reflection can prevent jealousy from leading to destructive outcomes. Genesis 4 teaches us that jealousy is powerful and dangerous. It can cloud our judgment, fuel harmful actions, destroy relationships, bring serious consequences. However, it also stresses that jealousy can be recognized and controlled, and that choosing to manage it opens the way to growth and better relationships. After the Cain and Abel story, we will get to our first genealogy. I will not be reading the genealogies. I will reference them, especially when they cut in and out. If you're interested in them, please go read them. They're easily found online if you don't own a Bible. My reason for not reading these to you is a failing of mine. When I was young, very young, The only person I knew who regularly attended church and the only person I ever saw reading the Bible was my grandmother. As far as I knew, all of my family were believers. Because I knew they were believers, I thought I was the only one who didn't know the Bible. I thought people went to church to learn about the Bible. And because my parents didn't attend church, I secretly read the Bible. If anyone invited me to church, I always accepted. Where I grew up, there were church buses that went up and down the streets on Sunday morning. Often I would stand outside in my yard hoping a bus would come down our street. If it did, I'd flag it down and I'd go to church. I didn't care what religion or denomination it was. I was desperate to learn the Bible before anyone found out I didn't know it. But what I found out was that very few of these churches taught the Bible. What I read in the Bible on my own, I never really heard in church. So I doubled down and studied at home. I hid my Bible so no one would question me. I learned a lot. The problem is, I had never heard how many of the names or places were actually pronounced. I stored them in my brain incorrectly. As much as I have tried, I cannot replace the names with the correct pronunciation. However, I will point out before skipping that section if anything is relevant to the story. Don't get me wrong, I don't think the genealogies are not important. I do. I think the genealogies are very important. And here's why. I like lists, as you probably realize by now. So here's another one. Genealogies connect individuals to a larger story. Genealogies situate people within the flow of history. They show that no one stands alone. Everyone is part of a lineage, a community, and a story that began before them and will continue after. Your life is linked to those who came before and to those who come after. You inherit both blessings and challenges from your ancestors. Genealogies show the faithfulness of God. Many biblical genealogies trace God's promises down through the generations, like Adam to Noah, Abraham to David, David to Jesus. God's plans unfold over time, sometimes through many generations. This teaches patience, trust, and the importance of faithfulness, even when immediate results are not seen. Genealogies affirm identity and belonging. In the olden times, genealogy determined inheritance, tribal identity, and social status. It answered questions like, who are you? Where do you belong? What is your role? Knowing your roots shapes your identity and can provide a sense of belonging and purpose. Genealogies mark transitions and turning points. They often bridge major events or eras. Life is a series of transitions, and each generation has its role in carrying forward the story. Genealogies highlight both the ordinary and the extraordinary. Biblical genealogies include both well-known figures like Noah or Abraham and lesser-known or even flawed individuals. Every life matters in the bigger picture, even those who seem obscure or ordinary. God can work through anyone. Genealogies remind us of human mortality and continuity. The repeated formula, especially in Genesis 5, and he died, reminds us of the human condition, mortality, and the passage of time. Life on earth is finite. Use your days wisely, and remember that your choices impact future generations. Genealogies can teach moral and spiritual lessons. Sometimes genealogies include brief comments about individuals. Enoch walked with God, and he was not, for God took him. Legacies are not just biological, but moral and spiritual. Your character, how you live, can be a greater legacy than your name. One of the biggest takeaways, if you've ever done your own genealogy, is if you don't have kids of your own, no one will ever know you were here. No one will look you up, be able to research your accomplishments, know how hard you worked, how faithful you were. You're here because your parents had children, their parents had children, and on and on. When I did my genealogy, I often wondered about the brothers and sisters of my ancestors. Often their names would be listed on a census, then no trace of them after that. Genealogies are much more than lists of names. They are bridges across generations, reminders of promises, and frameworks for understanding identity, legacy, and faith. They teach us life is interconnected, that every individual matters, and that the story of humanity is a tapestry woven through many lives, choices, and acts of faith. Now to the reading of Genesis 4. Cain and Abel. Now the man knew his wife Eve, and she conceived and gave birth to Cain, and she said, I have gotten a man with the help of the Lord. And again, she gave birth to his brother Abel. Abel was a keeper of flocks, but Cain was a cultivator of the ground. So it happened in the course of time that Cain brought an offering to the Lord of the fruit of the ground. Abel, on his part, also brought of the firstborn of his flock and of their fat portions. And the Lord had regard for Abel and for his offering, but for Cain and his offering he had no regard. So Cain became very angry, and his countenance fell. Then the Lord said to Cain, Why are you angry, and why is your countenance fallen? If you do well, will not your countenance be lifted up? And if you do not do well, sin is lying at the door, and its desire is for you, but you must rule over it. Then Cain spoke to Abel, his brother, and it happened when they were in the field that Cain rose up against Abel his brother and killed him. Then the Lord said to Cain, Where is Abel your brother? And he said, I do not know. Am I my brother's keeper? And he said, What have you done? The voice of your brother's blood is crying out to me from the ground, and now cursed are you from the ground, which has opened its mouth to receive your brother's blood from your hand. When you cultivate the ground, it will no longer yield its strength to you. You will be a vagrant and a wanderer on the earth. And Cain said to the Lord, My punishment is too great to bear. Behold, you have driven me this day from the face of the ground and from your face. I will be hidden, and I will be a vagrant and a wanderer on the earth. And it will be that whoever finds me will kill me. So the Lord said to him, Therefore, whoever kills Cain, vengeance will be taken on him sevenfold. And the Lord appointed a sign for Cain, so that no one who found him would strike him. Then Cain went out from the presence of the Lord and settled in the land of Nod, east of Eden. Then Cain knew his wife, and she conceived and gave birth to Enoch. And he built a city and called the name of the city Enoch, after the name of his son. Starting here is a genealogy, Genesis 4:18 to 4:24. Resuming here at Genesis 4:25. Then Adam knew his wife again, and she gave birth to a son, and named him Seth, for she said, God has set for me another seed in place of Abel, for Cain killed him. And to Seth, to him also a son was born, and he called his name Enosh. Then men began to call upon the name of the Lord. I want to cover two topics before I end for today. First is decision-making and problem-solving, my favorites. Second is how the foundations for the Ten Commandments have already been addressed in the 4 chapters we have read. First, the steps for decision-making and problem-solving. 1. Recognize the problem or decision point. Notice when you're frustrated, jealous, or at a crossroads. Recognize an emotional or situational trigger as a sign that a decision needs to be made. 2. Pause and reflect on your emotions. Before acting, acknowledge your feelings. Emotions, especially anger or jealousy, can cloud your judgment. Take a moment to reflect before reacting. 3. Seek guidance and consider consequences. Listen for advice or warnings from your conscience, trusted people, spiritual sources. Consider the consequences of your potential actions. Think about what doing right looks in your situation. 4. Make a choice. Rule over impulse. You have options. Make a deliberate, thoughtful choice rather than letting negative impulses take over. Problem solving means taking control, not letting emotions dictate your actions. 5. Act responsibly. Acting rashly or destructively can have irreversible consequences. The story urges you to act with integrity and responsibility, even under emotional strain. 6. Accept accountability and learn. Be prepared to accept responsibility for your actions. Learning from mistakes is a key part of problem solving and growth. 7. Understand the possibility of mercy and new beginnings. Even poor decisions can lead to learning and new opportunities if you acknowledge them and seek to do better. Genesis 4, through both positive examples, God's counsel, and negative examples, Cain's actions, teaches that wise decision-making involves self-awareness, reflection, openness to guidance, deliberate choice, responsible action, accountability, and openness to growth. These are core steps for anyone facing problems or big decisions. Secondly, these concepts apply to the 10 Commandments. God is a creator and the sole object of worship. God creates everything. Humanity is made in God's image, and God's word is supreme. In the 10 Commandments, you shall have no other gods before me. You shall not make for yourself a graven image. This concept, God alone is to be worshiped and obeyed. Sanctity of the Sabbath and rest. God rests on the seventh day, blessing and sanctifying it. In the 10 Commandments, remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. The concept, a rhythm of work and rest, and setting apart time as sacred. Honor in family relationships. The creation of marriage and family and the consequences of broken family relationships, Cain and Abel. In the 10 Commandments, honor your father and your mother. The concept, the value and order of family relationships. Sanctity of life. Life is God's gift. Humans are made in God's image. Cain's murder of Abel is presented as a grave sin with serious consequences. In the 10 Commandments, you shall not murder. The concept, the sacredness of human life. Marriage infidelity. The union of Adam and Eve as the model for marriage. In the 10 Commandments, you shall not commit adultery. The concept, faithfulness, in marriage and in the sanctity of the marital bond. Respect for property and the rights of others. The principle of stewardship over creation and the breakdown of relationships, envy, violence, as a form of taking what is not rightfully yours. In the 10 Commandments, you shall not steal. The concept, respecting others' rights and property. Truthfulness. Adam and Eve's attempt to hide and shift blame after disobedience, and Cain's lie, am I my brother's keeper? In the 10 Commandments, you shall not bear false witness. The concept, the importance of truthfulness and accountability. Coveting and envy. Cain's envy of Abel's favor before God leads to sin. In the 10 Commandments, you shall not covet. The concept, the destructive power of envy and the need for contentment. Genesis 1 through 4 lays the conceptual groundwork for the 10 Commandments by establishing the value of God's authority, the sanctity of life and relationships, the importance of truth and the dangers of envy and violence,
These stories show before the law is even given why such commandments are necessary for a just and flourishing human community. I'm Merrill, and this is Battlegram. If you have received any value from today's episode, please share and subscribe. Any value returned back to me is greatly appreciated. I hope to see you next episode. Visit battlegram.net if you would like me to reply to you.